Good morning, everybody. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about art and kindness. And generally, I want to talk about kindness in drama schools and acting conservatories. And more specifically, I wanted to talk about my experience training at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. Before I get started with all that, I should mention that I had originally intended on making a sort of three-part video series, with the second part being about art and access. But I did a bit of thinking over the week and sort of came to the conclusion that while I do have things to say about art and access, I am instead going to use my platform to amplify other voices who are speaking about this topic, and more specifically some BIPOC creators and creators who are in the theatrical community that are working really closely with anti-racism and dismantling and pointing out racist tendencies in the American theater scene and other theater scenes. So I'm going to link down in the description below to a few articles and manifestos and resources that have been eye-opening and helpful for me, and I'm hoping will be eye-opening for some of you who are watching. Before I dive into my experience with Guildhall, I also want to acknowledge that when the Black Lives Matter movement was gaining momentum in the US and abroad, Guildhall was called out on social media, most specifically on Twitter, by students and alumni for racism present in the training and in the rehearsal room and in the core faculty, and more specifically, some specific instances of racism and microaggressions that had been perpetrated by current members of staff. So if you're watching this video and you're interested in learning more about how that situation is unfolding and the allegations that are being brought to light against drama institutions specifically in the UK, I'd encourage you to get on social media and do a bit of research. The information is all out there. It's become a very public topic of conversation. I'm not specifically going to be talking about that situation in this video. All I'm going to say on the subject is this. I 100% stand in support of all the current students and alumni who are speaking the truth of their experiences with injustice, microaggressions, and trauma at the hands of Guildhall. And as an alumni of the school and of the acting program specifically, I am going to add my voice however and wherever I can to support the students coming forward and to ensure that the school holds itself responsible or is held responsible for their actions in the past and takes progressive measures moving forward to ensure that these things won't happen to another generation of artists, and that reparative action is taken towards students who suffered during their time at Guildhall because of a racist environment and microaggressions and racism in the rehearsal room, in the classroom, and on the stage. So before I went to drama school, I feel like I had spoken to a lot of people who were like, oh yeah, when you go to drama school, they really break you down and then build you up better than you ever were. And I think that sort of mentality is present in a lot of artistic disciplines. It's this whole mentality of like, if you press coal hard enough, it becomes a diamond. And I do believe that you can't have artistic growth without criticism. But that being said, there is definitely a difference between criticism and cruelty. And I think it is so easy and so common for drama schools to slip over that line when giving feedback. And I'm going to speak specifically about Guildhall here. So at Guildhall, the first term is spent doing just a lot of technique work without any sort of showings at all. But once you get into the second term, you start doing projects where you'll work for like 5 weeks on medieval mystery plays or on a Chekhov play or on a musical, and then you'll do a little showing, sort of do your little scenes, your little bit. And the day after that, Guildhall does this thing called Notes Day, and you get feedback on your work in that project. Now, the first project we did was medieval mysteries, and I got really good feedback during that project. I would say it all fell under the umbrella of criticism. So it was very much things like, you're a bit tense. Do you notice that you carry your weight unevenly in this leg? Or you locked your knees? Or I thought you could have made bolder physical choices. Or your breath is still quite shallow. We can work on getting it lower. Very technical things. For a while, I thought that was how it would be. But something changed for me at the end of my first year. I started noticing that the Guildhall program is quite heteronormative. It leans often on racist stereotypes in material. A lot of ableist language was being used in movement classes. Fat phobia and body talk was rampant. There was a lot more energy going towards the men in my year than the women in my year, even though for one of the first times ever we had an equal gender split. I found that I started to call things out in the room, and as that happened, I sort of experienced this pretty rapid decline from being a person who got notes based on technicality to being a person who got notes based on personality. It went from being things like, oh, you maybe have too much weight in your left foot, which is why you're struggling to move freely on stage, to things like, nobody in your year wants to work with you because you're too outspoken. You make everyone in the room uncomfortable. I spoke up at an all-school meeting where we were discussing racism in the training and sort of had a head-to-head conflict with a teacher. And in my next note session, he told me that I would never have a career as a professional actor because of my bad personality. So one of the nice things about Guildhall, I will say something nice about them, is you can go to the student center and they have counseling there for free and a nurse and things like that. I went to them to see if I could get student structures put into place to sort of make me feel safer in the Guildhall environment. And they were great. They wrote up this document for me, which was confidential, that said that I have anxiety and depression, and sort of created a list of things that I might need to do in order to protect my mental health, which is brilliant. But during one of my note sessions, one of my teachers referenced this confidential document to my face and said that they thought my mental health was affecting the success of my year group. And it really got to the point where I felt very much like I was labeled as a troublemaker within my year, and I was sort of targeted in a certain way by the staff. I had a note session where I sat in a room with a teacher and had them say that I was dismissive and aggressive, and then ended it with saying that he'd said hi to me in a hallway and I had ignored him, and that's not acceptable behavior. And this particular teacher sort of went on to become the interim head of acting at the school, and with him it got to a point where I actually filed a formal complaint with the school against him for harassment, because I felt that my behavior as a human being was being policed and affected by his attitude towards me speaking openly against the institution's issues. You know, I'm a white cisgendered woman. My experience is the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the tip of the iceberg. So whenever I spoke up at Guildhall, the only reason that they were right and I was the problem was because they were the powerful entity and I was the less powerful entity. For example, when I went in with my formal complaint of harassment, I spoke to the principal of the school. I wrote a very long letter detailing everything that had happened between me and this member of staff, and I explained it to her, and she was very good. She let me speak till the end, and her response to me was, I spoke to him. He said he was doing what is best for you, and I believe him. Things like this don't happen at a school where I am principal. And that was it. And I know that I'm not the only person in my year or in the history of Guildhall or probably in Guildhall's future that had this experience or will have this experience. And it may not be as directly linked to facing an institution head on as mine was, but it will undoubtedly be linked to institutional oppression and bullying and power systems and dynamics that are impossible to negotiate when you are in such a vulnerable position as a student. I've read a lot about this online and people have spoken often about this, but it's true. At Guildhall, the tutors are responsible for your grades, and more importantly than that, they are directly responsible for your third year casting. So if you are someone who butts heads with a teacher, that person is then going to turn around and determine what parts you get to play in third year when the industry is coming in to look at you and agents are coming in. And I mean, it is wild. And I've honestly been thinking about making this video for a long time. I think specifically after I did the Q&A about theater, because the first question I pulled out of the hat was, is an MA worth it? And I said yes. And that may be very confusing in the context of this video, but I will say this. I believe my MA was worth it, and I am glad that I was at Guildhall in my year when I was. But I will always say this, I do not recommend Guildhall School of Music and Drama for acting training, especially as an MA, but I do not recommend it flat out. I think the program is really conservative. It's a super closed system that is not at all aware of how far behind the times it is, or is not interested in catching up. I mean, it's 2020. Maybe I'll watch this video back in 2030 and say, wow, things have changed so much, but it's a no from me. So what do you do if you're at drama school and you're finding yourself in a situation where you're facing more cruelty than criticism? I think in the same way that there has been a lot of information online about how to disrupt racism when you encounter it in the day-to-day life, we can use a lot of the same tactics for disrupting institutional cruelty. And sometimes that will align with things like racist comments or sexist comments or classist comments or ableist comments. And we absolutely should call them out when we hear them. There's also some standalone groups you can reach out to, and sometimes your school will be partnered with one. So for example, Guildhall is partnered with the Diversity Initiative. And I did report several things to them when I was at Guildhall. And honestly, I don't know how helpful it was, but I do know that at the very least, the information is getting to someone and a record is starting to be made. And that's another thing that I will say. When I filed this formal complaint in my third year, I went back and forth a lot on whether or not I should do it, because I was trying to do my third year shows. I was trying to engage with the industry in some small way and learn my lines, and to be involved in a formal complaint process just felt exhausting. I wrote a 7-page letter and I spoke to, here, let me get it actually, the head of student affairs, the head of acting training, the head of drama administration, my study support tutor who's responsible for my mental health guidelines, the student union president, the production arts and drama administration officer for programs and operations, and I sent an email to the Diversity Initiative. And this is important because even if nothing came of my complaint then, it was on record with all of those people. And actually further down the line, it became pretty good that I had made that complaint. I know at Guildhall, oftentimes when things happened in the rehearsal room or things were said or unsafe things happened, students ended up having to complain to the person directly involved in the incident, which is unfathomable. Partially the reason that I felt able to make this video and people have been empowered to come forward with stories of their experiences at drama school is because there is more public view of the issue and there is more public support for these students. Also, as an alumni, there is a real feeling of like, I'm not at Guildhall anymore. What are they gonna do? Revoke my degree posthumously? I'm not dead. I guess my hope for sharing this and my reason for sharing it now is that one person out there will watch this video and identify the ways that institutional bullying is operating in their own sphere and say to themselves, that's wrong and I am right. They are wrong, I am right. And I guess the moral of the story for me is that Guildhall didn't win. My time at Guildhall did not win because I'm still acting, I'm still making art, and more importantly than all of that, I am still going to go into artistic spaces and disrupt them when I see instances of injustice taking place. You know, that's I think part of my life's work as an artist and a human being. And I'm not perfect, obviously, and I'm gonna make mistakes, but I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm gonna keep doing it. So I hope that everyone is staying well. I hope that you're staying safe. I hope that since my last video, you've thought about making some bad art. And I will see you in the next one for some silly artistic shenanigans. All right. Bye.